This is Foul Players Radio, your podcast for arts, entertainment, and pop culture. Welcome. My name is Michael Spedden, your host. Every episode features fun, fascinating stories about people in the performing arts, actors, authors, dancers, writers, musicians, athletes, you name it. Folks who are center stage, backstage, on camera, or behind the scenes. Sit back and listen. Let's have some fun. Foul Players Radio is a proud production of the Foul Players Group and the official podcast of the Foul Players of Perryville.
Hi, this is Bud Becker.
Hi, everybody. Dwight Weems from Gaz the Fun Band.
Hi, folks. This is Jay David.
Hey, this is Brian Damage from Kix and Rhino Bucket.
Hi, this is Kim of Kim's Crypt.
Hello, my name is Gunhild Carling.
Hi, this is Paul Castiglia, and you're listening to Foul Players Radio, the one-stop shop for all your pop culture needs.
Welcome back to another episode of Foul Players Radio, your one-stop shop for all of your pop culture needs. Tonight, we welcome back Alexandra Hewitt. She had been on the show previously, and I invited her back to promote her new book, Shimmer, a memoir. During our discussion, she shared a nice passage from it about her late father. The story deals with her growing up in the shadow of her mother's mental illnesses and her father's incredible devotion to her, as well as many other things in her life. We also discuss the classes she teaches, her Mortified shows in Baltimore and D.C. Information on all of these things, including how to purchase Shimmer, can be found at www.alexandrahewitt.com. Remember, all of our episodes can be found at foulplayersradio.com and on our YouTube page, youtube.com/@foulplayersradio. Remember, hit that like and subscribe button. We'll be right back with Alexandra Hewitt right after these words. Hello, listeners. We at Foul Players Radio thank you for all of your support over the past 10 seasons and nearly 300 episodes. We would like to encourage you to keep listening and spread the word. Audio versions of all episodes can be found on our main website, foulplayersradio.com, as well as on many of the other platforms you can see here. You can find all of our Season 9 and 10 episodes, as well as some best of episodes and shorts on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/@foulplayersradio. Be sure to hit the subscribe button to get alerts when new episodes are released. No matter what platform you choose to listen, you can help us greatly by hitting the subscribe button and giving us an honest review. You can also help us by supporting us at patreon.com/foulplayersradio or at buymeacoffee.com/foulplayerw. Your support makes it possible for us to continue to be your one-stop shop for all of your pop culture needs. Be sure to follow us on social media, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter for new episode announcements and news and updates on all of our guests. Thank you, and enjoy this episode.
Hey, you guys, this is Gina Shock, drummer of the Go-Go's.
Snowman here.
Hey, Mary Jo Peel here.
Hi, this is Kathy Ladman.
Hi, this is Jay Nedry from the Road Dogs.
This is A.D. Adams, and you are tuned in to Foul Players Radio with your host, Michael Spedden.
The Foul Players of Perryville will be returning to the Western Maryland Scenic Railroad on July 1st, August 5th, September 2nd, October 7th, and 28th. For more information, please see www.wmsr.com and www.foulplayersofperryville.com. Hope to see you there. And welcome back to this episode of Foul Players Radio. We have returning to the show, Alexandra Hewitt. Alexandra has recently written a book called Shimmer, a memoir, and I just recently read it. I've also took one of her classes recently. She's actively teaching English, theater, all kinds of writing classes, and I just took one of her stand-up comedy courses, which was great. Welcome back. Good to see you again.
Thank you. It's so nice to be back. Thank you. It's nice to be asked twice. Thank you.
Sure. We kind of met each other through a mutual friend, Alfred Guy, who was with us last time we spoke. And you and I had done a couple of Lee Dahl films. I mean, we'd been in the same films, though we didn't shoot, we weren't on set together.
Right.
And that's just a wonderful family. It looks like he's out doing some other things now, mostly musical. And I've seen a number of notifications about that, which has been very exciting. And but I saw something else on the internet that was very exciting this past spring. I saw that somebody I know was teaching a course in stand-up comedy, how to write it and perform it. And I was like, hey, I know her. I think I'll sign up. So I did. And we had a great time. We really had a great time together doing that.
Yeah. Well, and it's funny, I don't call the class stand up because
Right,
I
right. Yeah.
call it comedy writing and performance. I spend a lot of time with as a writer and someone who teaches and writes. Yeah, Finding the Funny is a class that I been teaching at Hopkins, I think for 3 semesters. And I've been teaching in the Odyssey program at Hopkins for probably 7 years. I've taught class, so they're continuing education classes. Mostly adults who have already, been to college or just want to take a class without having to deal with exams and finals. So I've taught classes up on writing. One class was had to do with the artist's way, like it was inspired by the artist's way. So it was like how to find your unlimited potential creatively. I taught a class on trauma and creativity, looking at artists like Yayoi Kusama and Frida Kahlo. And then during last spring of 2022, when the Ukraine attacks began from Russia, I felt like the world was so sad. And I'm like, we just need to laugh. And so that's when I pitched this class to Hopkins, thinking like, they're not going to like it. They're going to think it's dumb. And so what I wanted to do, I also produce a storytelling show called Mortified, where I work with people and I go through their archives, their diaries, where they share those on stage. And so I spent a lot of time and it's a comedy. So I think I'm pretty well versed in like finding the funny and like what's funny and how to have something on stage that is funny. And even looking at the things that are difficult, like how do you look at that? And that was kind of the gist of the class. Like, how do you find the things that are real in life that are difficult, and how do you find funny things in that? And so, yeah. And also, how do you get on stage and have confidence? And so as an actor and someone who teaches theater, it just felt like a kind of a natural combination. And I laughed and everyone in class laughed. And so I think it accomplished some of the things that we wanted, that I was just, hoping for our little bit of humanity, so, yeah, and you were great. You were so funny. And it, we had the class on Zoom. So that was kind of a different dynamic. Then we actually got to perform in a comedy club in Hamden, the Lou Room at Zissimo's. Shout out to everyone there, to Michael Furr there for helping us out and letting us use this space. But I thought that was just a really fun, just a fun way to just express yourself, and you did great.
Well, thank you. Thank you. That is a nice space. I've performed there before. I have an acoustic guitar act, where we write silly songs and perform them. It's sort of a quasi stand-up act. And then I'd also performed there with one of my actors, a number of years ago. They had, it was actually during Hunfest about 5 or 6 years ago. They had a comedy showcase that night, and 3 of us got together and we did, I think, 3 or 4 sketches, one original. And then we did Bob and Ray, the Komodo Dragon. We did an Abbott and Costello routine and a Nichols and May routine. And that was a lot of fun too. It was, there are a lot of younger people there that this stuff they would have no idea about. And I'm the kind of guy, I'm a classic rock kind of guy. I like, a lot of stuff, and I like sharing these things with people, as, just to see what things were like before, because there were a lot of great things that led to where we are now. I really enjoy old movies and that sort of thing, and this kind of thing I like to share it with people too. It seems like I was reading your book, and you kind of got bit by the performing bug early, and it seems like we liked a lot of some of the same things growing up. I guess when you were a child, you put on your own shows in your room. Your audience or your sidekicks were your stuffed animals and your dolls and everything. And I think anybody that gets the performance bug at a young age does something like that.
Yeah. I don't know. I was I remember in kindergarten I was one of the stars of our Christmas play, and Kenneth. And I remember we were both angels, and we had this line in the front of we were we were, look, I see the star, or do you see the star? I think was the line. And, people clapped. I'm like, whoa, this is great. And I grew up in New Jersey, and my dad would take me to New York City to see plays. So I saw a few musicals, and we would go see the Rockettes at the holiday show, and Nutcracker. And I knew, like, wow, like people do this. And I also had friends in my school who were performing. There was a girl in second grade who was in Annie on Broadway. Like, she wasn't Annie, but she was one of the orphans.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
when I heard this, I was like, wait, a kid can do this? And wait, what? And another young woman, a young girl in my class was, I think it was like sixth grade. She was in a National McDonald's commercial. And there was a boy who was in Raging Bull, and I was like, wait, what? And Fame came out, the show Fame with Debbie Allen. And I was like, wait, there's a school you can go to. And then I heard about Juilliard. I'm like, wait a minute, there's an even more like famous, amazing school you can go to for college. And I was never encouraged by my dad. He always said that, if you're going to be an actor, you're going to be poor and unhappy. And he said to learn how to play golf so you can make the deals. I'm like, what are you talking about? And so I was a business major. I was a business major and psychology major and double major in college. But then I was like, I'm not making any deals, but I feel that it's important to market oneself as a performer, as an actor, and as a creative person. And I think it's always good to know, like, how to balance your checkbook and how to, like, take care of those things and understand the economy, but I'm not making deals on a golf course. So
Right.
but later on in life, my dad was also a writer, so he had that creativity. So and he even said, there's a quote, he said, writing is what we do to survive. So but I think for someone who came from Eastern Europe, who escaped, after World War II, and was in a camp, it was a displaced persons camp, and then to come to the United States, and I was the first person to get a bachelor's degree in my family. So I can see the perspective of, like, no, you need to make these very wise, safe decisions. And I was like, no. So, but I did go on. I did get a master's in psychology, and I was a therapist for years. So I saw patients for about 10, 15 years, interrupted by moves and babies. But yeah, and I think that leads back to my book. I mean, I grew up with a mother who had schizophrenia, and so mental health and psychiatry and psychology was always something so fascinating to me, and the human brain and why people, what happened. I knew I couldn't help my mother, but I wanted to find a way to maybe help other people in some way. So that's why I chose psychology. And it's a nice parallel to when I studied acting, is because it's all about human behavior and why people do things. And I think it's stories. As a therapist, I would listen to people tell me their stories. And I think that's what motivates me the most, of just, I love writing stories and helping people craft their own, and performing, stories that have already been written. So I think it all kind of connects, because being a human being is very complicated, and mental illness is something that I think is prevalent in most people's lives. And a lot of people don't talk about it a lot. So I wrote the book to kind of like I always felt very alone and kind of embarrassed by my mother's illness. And there was like a sense of shame, and there's nothing to be ashamed about at all, about going to therapy or having a mental illness. It's a brain disease. And so, and I know I've just gone way off topic. We started about performing, but I think it all kind of like links together,
Yep. I think you and I had something really in common. And you just kind of mentioned about, what your father was telling you. My family was 3 generations of steel workers on both sides, and farmers. And my parents were the first ones to go to college. And they were, with me. I mean, they saw that I was, my start was in playing in bands, and I did that for a long time. And their whole thing was, well, first of all, they didn't like the stuff I was into because my parents were the 60s, but they were the Leave It to Beaver 60s. They weren't the Woodstock 60s.
Yeah.
And, they saw that I was in all this, heavier rock and roll. And they were like, "Oh my, you're not getting involved in that," 'cause they thought everybody was on drugs, and but they wanted me to have a practical base,
Yeah, like stable. Yeah.
stable, like you had just mentioned, safe choices. Now, did your father come around to start to enjoy your performing? Like my family did, with me. Did he?
My dad never saw me on stage, but
Never
he
did, huh?
No, no. But I did this commercial magazine shoot for this American Baby magazine years
Oh,
ago.
sure, yeah. Mhm.
And I was like the mom. It was like a 4-page or maybe 6-page spread. So they had like 2 little girls that were my kids, that they had little actors that they had for the shoot. And I was the mom in the minivan who was like the bad driver. So it was
Mhm.
all about like I was distracted, and it was this whole shoot that they did, but they also would play that
Mhm.
in doctor's offices and I think in the grocery store. Like it was sort of like the baby channel or whatever it was. And
Mhm.
so my dad, not only did he, like, I remember he said to me, he's like, "Oh, they were playing that in the Rite Aid or the, CVS, whatever pharmacy he was in." And but he would carry around the magazine and show people like, "Oh, that's my daughter." And so,
Mhm.
and it was to me, it was like, it seemed kind of dumb. Like I got paid a lot of money to like sit in the car and, be on the phone and change a station and, yell at my kids. And it was just a photo shoot. But so my dad got to see that. But
Mhm.
yeah.
Right, right. Well, that's good that he got to see something that you did, and I'm sure probably the fact that you live so far apart. I mean, you had mentioned a number of times in the book it was like a 3-hour drive for you to get back to your hometown to help
Yeah,
out with your parents
and
and stuff.
my mom was my dad's main priority. I mean, he
Yeah,
was really limited in the things, places he can go. So,
sure. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. But I mean, he knew of the things I know he was proud of me. I know he was proud of me. So that just kind of makes my heart really happy.
Oh, well, I mean, any father, I think, would be. I mean, you're quite an accomplished person. That's one thing that I know about you. All the things that you've accomplished, all the things that you're involved in, you do them all quite well. So, yeah, I can't say I blame them on that one.
Thank you.
Talking a bit about this, you had kind of, you know, the last point that we had gone over, we started talking about performing, and it kind of got into, talking about the things you experienced with your mother, and some of the things that you had mentioned, having to do with mental illness. I would say today, and I'm sure you probably agree, versus 25, 30 years ago, um, it's a lot more out in the open. It's discussed a lot more. I think it's probably, if not completely understood, from the fact of people knowing exactly what's wrong, but the fact that they understand that it exists in a lot of people. I think we've come a long way with that. Years
Yeah.
ago, you know, people would say, "Oh, you're a psycho, you're a schizo, you belong in a nut house." But they don't realize, and back in those days, they didn't realize that it was almost looked at as a character flaw with the people that had it. Something's wrong with you, you ain't right. But nowadays, people are realizing that it's a disorder. There could be a chemical imbalance or something that causes something to go wrong with your brain.
Brain
Just
disease.
like you have a heart problem, or just like you may have, a problem with your appendix or your gallbladder. It's just another body part that, for whatever reason, isn't functioning properly. You kind of agree with that? And
Well, oh my gosh, 100%. Yeah. I mean, I think nowadays, I think there's less of a stigma to
Mhm.
talk about therapy and to talk about mental health issues. And I do a lot of work with NAMI. I volunteer with NAMI, the National Alliance on Mental Illness. And
Oh, yeah.
so it's a national organization that provides support for families, for
Mhm.
individuals that have mental illness, support groups for families. Um, and resources for people, that are dealing with all sorts of, that are living with mental illness. One of the things I really appreciate is with NAMI too. I mean, they work really hard to stop the stigma and to kind of like reframe how we think about mental health issues. Like if someone had cancer, you wouldn't say someone is cancer, right? And oftentimes people will say, well, that person is schizophrenic or is, so, the way to rephrase this, instead of labeling, this person is living with this, or they suffer with this, because that's just one part of them. And I also think the treatments available now are so much more vast and kinder. And, the ECT shock therapy that my mom received in the 70s was not like the ECT that exists now at Shepherd Pratt. There's like the whole ECT center. And it's, people go in for the day, they have their treatment and they leave. And it's not like you see in movies where people are strapped down and they're screaming. I mean, it's a whole different type of treatment. So I think from that perspective too, there is definitely more openness. And that's one of the reasons I wrote the book too, is because I didn't want people to feel like they're alone. And whenever I do a book event, I always have someone from NAMI. So no matter if I'm in Baltimore, I was on the Eastern Shore, in Baltimore County, I would have a rep from NAMI attend and to be part of the conversation, to talk about what the resources they have. And then the discussion with the audience, it's amazing where people that I don't know, and even people I know sometimes. I know that I did this reading at the Ivy bookstore, and a few people came up to me and said, this woman I knew for years, and she said, my grandfather had schizophrenia, or people will say like, my brother committed suicide, or my sister has bipolar disorder, and people talk about it, and you can see, it's hard for them to talk about it because it's something that we don't go around talking about every day. But I think the more you do, and the more I share, it just other people share too, and there's conversation begins of what's out there in treatment, and it's just a sense of support. So I'm really, I don't know, I feel really good about that, because in my home growing up, my mother's disease was very much a secret and kind of mysterious, and I just didn't talk about it. And it was a huge thing, but that I didn't talk about. So I feel really grateful that I can now, and maybe encourage others to as well.
And and again, growing up with this as a big part of your life, I mean, you were really able to give a lot back to this community by getting into the line of work that you got into, and really having an understanding of what it's like in helping these folks.
Yeah, I think I have, like, I worked at Shepherd Pratt Hospital, a psychiatric hospital in Towson, and they have other sites throughout Maryland. But I worked with this nonprofit that worked at Shepherd Pratt, and we had a group. We had a drummer, a dancer, a visual artist, and me. I taught theater, improv, writing to patients for over 10 years. And I work with children in the adolescent day program. A child and adolescent day program. So from ages 5 to 18, kids that were there during the day, the adult day program, and a unit with adults that had schizophrenia, another day program. They were pretty high functioning because they were just there for the day. They would go home. So they were higher functioning than someone who was inpatient. And also I worked in the inpatient geriatric unit. And so I taught theater, improv, and writing, and it was joyous and beautiful. And, there would be people there, and I was there not as a therapist, I was there as a teaching artist, as an actor. And there would be people there who I was told would not respond during the group meetings, group sessions, but doing an improv scene, they would find their bravery on the stage, and it was so beautiful to see. And that change, like that movement, I just felt it was really beautiful work. And, we ended up losing our funding for the program, but it was right around the time I was starting grad school to get my MFA in creative writing. So it kind of, for me, it worked out and that was all, although that writing was the writing that went towards the book. So that kind of worked out. But that was just a stunning program. And for me as a child, like creativity helped me. And so to share that with others, I don't know, like that's why I love teaching theater so much, because it helps, especially with kids. And I'm teaching young women improv, like to have a voice and to feel comfortable in your own skin and to really connect with someone else, to really look in someone's eyes and connect with them. I think it's I don't know, I just think that's a very powerful thing. And just, again, to like feel confident about yourself and your body and your voice. Even if you're not going to be an actor, like what a gift that is, especially for a young woman or anyone, for a young man, or older person. It's just such a powerful tool to, to be grounded and feel that sense of self-esteem and confidence.
You're right about that. These classes, improv classes, are used for so many different things. I mean, you were using it as kind of a form of therapy for people, and you've also used it with students. But I've taught them, not that I'm the greatest improv teacher and I'm no expert, I am but I do, I have run games before at my place of employment for my department, to give people confidence, to help people think outside the box, to help people think on their feet. And there are a lot of skills you can definitely gain from having that kind of training. And really with me, again, it was just really just some basic things with my, coworkers to kind of, get our juices flowing in our head, to kind of think about how we handle ourselves with customers if we get ourselves into a bad situation or something like that. And there's just so much use for these skills that can be applied to so many different things in your life. It really is amazing.
Yeah, I mean, I would use that as a therapist. I would, this idea of yes and. I mean, in life, if you say no to something, you stop. You have no movement. On stage, if I say, what a wonderful day it is today on Mars, it's getting hot in here, and if you were like, we're not on Mars, you've killed the scene, as there's like no, it's that you've said no. In life, things happen that are horrible. People have accidents, if their family's killed in a car crash and they're the only survivor, or they've lost their legs in an accident, or, they've, horrible things happen to people. And our first initial reaction is, no, this is horrible. This is unfair. Why? But at some point, you have to find some strength to accept what's happened. Right. And then, so that's saying yes. And what do you do with it? How do you find a new way to build a new life and use creativity or find a way to let that go? So I think it's very, to me, improv is just a really great metaphor for life.
It really is. It really is. I agree.
Yeah. And also just connecting, how to connect with somebody, how to really listen, how to really listen to somebody.
That's true too. You really have to be able to be successful in that. You're absolutely right about that. Looking through your book a bit more here, talking about how, you were growing up and you got into performing, and then you were also really called to really help people with mental illnesses. Really interesting, this here. And, how you were, really a caretaker for both of your parents. Your father was really more for your mother, but both of you, contributed towards that. And we get to the point in life where we have to take care of our parents. So we become the adults and they become the children.
Yeah. I mean, they both died. They died 6 months apart. My dad
and
died.
that had to have been, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to
No,
jump
that's
on
okay.
you.
No. Yeah. I mean, my dad was 13 years older than my mom. So that was, I'm an only child too. So that was kind of my fear my entire life. Like, what do I do? What happened? What do I do with my mother? Because my dad, they were together. She did spend she did spend time in and out of hospitals, but primarily she was home. And my father always came home and he was there for her. It was incredibly stressful. My dad had heart disease, despite, walking and running 5 miles a day and eating oatmeal for breakfast and being vegetarian and not smoking. And like, he lived a very healthy lifestyle, but his heart, was taxed by living with my mother's illness. And so he ended up, he needed a heart valve replacement. That's kind of what killed him. And it's kind of it's a long, complicated story where I had my dad, my mom, and my aunt. My dad's sister, I didn't really write about this much in the book, but my aunt was widowed and her son had died. And so, like previously. And so my dad was also not only taking care of my mom, but he would check up on my aunt and his sister almost every day because she lived nearby and she had Alzheimer's. And so when both of my parents were hospitalized around the same time, so was my aunt. And so I had power of attorney of 3 people who lived in New Jersey, and I lived here in Maryland and Baltimore, 2 kids, and working and driving back and forth to deal with it. So it was a lot. It was pretty overwhelming. My dad said to me at one point, because when I would kind of plead for him to maybe get respite care or to get some help for at home with my mom, he said that caregiving is a privilege. And so I don't want to sugarcoat and be like, oh, it's such an honor, but it's hard. It's hard and it's taxing, and it's people who are caregivers really need to do things for themselves and not feel guilty about it, because how are you going to show up for that person who needs you if you don't, show up for you? But it was really, really hard. Probably one of the hardest things I've had to do in my life in losing my dad, and a month later had to send my mom into hospice. She stopped eating the day before my dad died. And then she died 6 months later. So that was really rough. And then my aunt died the next following year, and she died at home. I had in-home caregiver. She wanted to die in her home, so I found a woman who was Belarusian, because my aunt spoke mostly Belarusian, especially when people have Alzheimer's, when they are aging, they kind of go back to their childhood language. And so so I was organizing all of that. So it was a hard time.
I can imagine.
But the book, like I still was able to find things that were funny, and I wrote a lot during that time too, just to kind of give myself some my own art therapy. Like writing really helped me. So and I'm not the only one who's had to deal with grief. It's something that we all have. If you haven't dealt with grief, you will eventually, period.
Right.
I mean, if you love someone, eventually you will suffer some sort of grief, because we don't live forever. And things happen. So that was the other thing. Writing about it really helped me in the grieving process, and it really just helped. I know other people who have lost their parents or lost loved ones, and been able to connect with that. And just another thing that's difficult, that if you talk about it, it's just, that's how we connect as humans. Like we all deal with these difficult things. How can we find the light in life sometimes? And that's why the book is called Shimmer. There are a lot of references to light and kind of mermaidy things too, but this idea of magic and light, how it's still there, and you have to struggle sometimes to take a peek at it to get you through.
I know, firsthand a lot about, and I guess another thing that we have in common too. My brother was primarily my father's caregiver. But my sister and I would also chip in when things got to be too heavy on my brother, or if there were just other things that needed to be done. There were a lot of things that my father needed that were just fairly routine, that were just, everyday, medicines. But then we also had a grandmother who was living in a home, and boy, was she a handful for the good. God bless those people, because she suffered from dementia again, something that happens as we get older. And that was a handful too. We were primarily, my brother was with my father a lot. I would spend a lot of time, and my sister would spend a lot of time visiting my grandmother at the home and taking care of things there. And it really is a lot. And not only this, you had, your 3 relatives, you had your job, you had the traveling, you had and two sons. Boy, I mean, you must have been spread thin. I mean, that's just that just had to have been absolutely overwhelming.
I'm lucky that I had a lot of, I have a village of friends, and I
Yeah.
had my cousins help me out, and I had my cousin and actually some friends who actually drove, because I just couldn't drive anymore. And it was because it wasn't like, oh, I'm driving to go see a show, or I'm gonna go out, have dinner with friends, or I was going to, go to the hospice, or go to, to the funeral home, or to go to talk to the lawyer, or go to clean out the basement in my dad's house and my parents' house, my family home. All that stuff. They're like, there's just business, or go to the bank, or pay the bills. Like, there was all this stuff taking over, basically my aunt's life for finances, my parents, my dad, and, everything was done by hand. There was no online banking, and I just continue writing out checks. And so I had all that on top of my own stuff. So it was a lot, but what do you do? As I think as a child, we forget like all the things I know my parents, that I don't know what my parents did for me, but I know as a mother, like what I did for my kids that they don't know about. They'll never remember. But I think that's just show up to love somebody and show up to care someone. Like, that's just being a decent human being.
Right. You had mentioned that there were a couple of passages in the book that you wanted to share. Did you want to read a couple of them?
Sure. Yeah. Let's see. Let me think. Father's Day is coming up, and so most people tell me they love the chapter about my dad. So I'm going to read a little bit from the Leo way. My dad was Leonid, Leo.
And you said, you had mentioned earlier too, that your father came here from, was it Belarus?
Belarus. Yeah. I'll read some from the beginning of this chapter, and then, yeah, I'm gonna read a little bit. So, here. There are two ways of doing things: the Leo way or the wrong way. This was my father's philosophy on life, greatly influenced by his time as a soldier in the Korean War. Leonid Surak was precise and meticulous, but he was also kind, funny, and a selfless man. He was short in stature, around 5'6", and he was my superhero. He treated others with respect and was always available to help anyone at any time. He was born in Belarus, which was then still part of the Soviet Union. It was called Belarusia at the time. When he was in his 80s, my father told me of his earliest memory when he was a child in the 1930s. I remember the sound of the shot. The KGB officer came to our home and murdered my father. My uncles were then taken to the Gulag in Siberia. We never saw them again. As a young boy, the eldest of two, responsibility was forced upon him to be the man of the house. I only knew that my grandfather died when my father was very young. Hearing this story made me understand the stoic nature of my father and his work ethic, and how this must have pained his heart. As an adult, his role of husband was compromised into that of caregiver, as my mother's struggle with mental illness crushed her ability to fulfill her duties as a wife, mother, and a person in general. My dad did it all. He drove me to school every day. He was my biggest fan in the audience for school plays or cheerleading competitions. He washed and ironed my clothes. He taught me how to read. He taught me how to drive a car. My father was very active in the Democratic Party. Because of my mother's illness, I happily tagged along with him to all of the social engagements. Tell me the elevator story again, I would beg him. Wide-eyed, I marveled at his tale of meeting Barbara Streisand in the elevator, the 1964 Democratic National Convention in Atlantic City. This was a few years before she starred in Hello, Dolly, one of my all-time favorite movie musicals. I was in awe that he actually talked to her, if only for a moment. I was certain Barbara would show up at one of the countless fundraising breakfasts or cocktail parties and belt out the theme from The Way We Were. My dad always looked so dapper at these events, either in a suit or navy blue blazer. I would wear my Sunday best, a purple and white smocked gingham dress and black patent leather Mary Janes. One time I remember we left an event singing People and our worst Streisand impression, cracking up from laughter. I indeed was the luckiest person in the world to have Leonid Surak as my father. At a wedding at the Belarusian Center in my hometown of South River, New Jersey, a nondescript hall with drab wood paneling that would come alive with polka music and vodka, my father taught me how to dance. Dad wore his best double-breasted suit, and I wore my bubblegum pink floor-length gown with short puffy sleeves. I was 7. Stand on my feet, he said, as the band played a schmaltzy waltz. We held hands, and I stood on his snazzy black dress shoes, and he counted 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. You're a wonderful dancer, he said proudly. We shared the love of baseball, and when you grow up in New Jersey, you're either a Yankees fan or a Mets fan. It was pinstripes or bust in my house. Sorry, O's fans, I do like the O's too. Opening day of the national holiday, my father would announce. I missed a day of 2nd grade and visited a magnificent place, the Bronx. My father held my tiny hand as we walked into Yankee Stadium, enticed by the smell of hot dogs and enthralled by the roar of the fans. This was my magic kingdom, and I was with my Prince Charming. I looked forward to church every Sunday because that meant more time with my father without the distraction of my mother, who was always so stylish, wearing a perfect pocket square peeking out of his navy blazer. I especially loved when he wore his caramel suede jacket. I'd sit close to him while the priest droned on in his long, boring homily and brushed the suede on his sleeve. I loved how the suede changed colors depending on which direction I moved my fingers. We always sat behind this blue-haired old lady who sang with like a loud, dying cat. It was painful to hear, and even more painful trying not to bust out laughing. Dad would simply glance over at me when she sang and wink, and I would almost throw up from holding in my giggles. After church, we finally laughed so hard and mimicked her screeching sounds. The laughter came to an abrupt halt when we came home. Something awful was always waiting for us in the mental institution that was our home. My mother would yell at my father, and he would calmly try to soothe her and convince her to take her medication. When things got out of hand, like the time when she almost blew the house up when she was fixing the boiler in the basement, or the time when she was walking around the neighborhood half naked and screaming, he would have her hospitalized. I was happiest when she wasn't home. I became the homemaker. I would cook and clean and do as much as I could so my father didn't have to. Before my mother's illness took her away, when I was around 3 or 4, I remember my parents would hug, and little kid me would run in the middle and they would hug me so tight. This love sandwich is what I longed for, and for our little family again. I became jealous of my mother's illness. How can he love her so much when she can't even do the things a wife is supposed to do? I begged him to divorce her or just leave her in the hospital forever. I realized as an adult that he did the right thing. The Leo way was the way of love. He taught me that caregiving is a privilege. And I'll stop right there.
What a tribute.
Yeah.
What a tribute. That was just very moving, very moving. And, listening to that, about your father, I'd never met him, but I almost feel like I knew him just from listening to that. What a wonderful father, what a wonderful husband. And my God, the adversity that he came from. I mean, could you imagine somebody just yanking you out of your house and sending you to Siberia? That was just the way people were living then. And how did he come here? I guess.
So my family, at the end of World War II, a lot of people in Poland and Belarus kind of had to leave, and because there was, things were decimated. So this is something that I didn't get a lot of, he never talked about it. My aunt's best friend had told me a story because that's how she met my aunt in the DP camp, the displaced persons camp. And her story was that they traveled on foot from Belarus to Waschenstadt, Germany, to this camp where they stayed for about 1.5 years. And so this was once a concentration camp that was, I guess, upgraded to a displaced persons camp, kind of the place to go before they were taken to the United States. So I don't know how they got to Germany, but it wasn't by a limo or a private jet,
Not at all.
on foot. And yeah, so, and from there they immigrated and came through Ellis Island and ended up in New Jersey. And there was a whole Belarusian community. Hence, there was a Belarusian center and a Russian Orthodox church that was, in the center of the town where I grew up. So that community was established. My mother came from Poland, and she was younger. So this was after the war, and they immigrated to New York. So they were in Queens.
Sure.
Yeah. So
I was going to ask you that when your father came here, because I'd seen, the storyline in a lot of movies, like for example, one example is like Avalon, if you've ever seen that by Barry Levinson, Brighton Beach Memoirs, especially with people in, the Eastern Europe corridor, Poland, Russia, trying to escape Nazi Germany, trying to escape that reach. A lot of times they were reaching out to family members. They may have had folks that came here before them. Fiddler on the Roof. They all, when they got kicked out of their town, they were all talking about what relative in America they were going to come live with, or Israel, or wherever they were going to go. But it sounds like, I guess your father was the first in his family to come here, correct?
right, he came with my grandmother, with his mother and his brother and sister. So
Okay.
yeah, so they came. I don't think they knew anybody. There was, the United States at that time was very kind to immigrants.
Sure. Yeah. So there was a community with the church, and I guess people that spoke the language and people that could be familiar with. So
There were quite a few Belarusian people, and like I said, in the town that I grew up in, kind of like community. So yeah.
Interesting. And I guess it was probably very similar for, I guess, when your mother came, a community. Well, just like in Baltimore City, we have Little Italy. There's all kinds of, the neighborhoods for different groups of people that came here, and they were kind of a support for each other and everything. Very interesting.
With her parents, her grandparents, and they all lived together. That was kind of the thing. First of all, they didn't have money to afford, so that's how they started out.
Oh yeah, they all probably just like they had in, like in the movie Avalon, that scenario they had family coming over, and I guess they figured out who was sharing bedrooms with who, and they were putting bunk beds up and everything just to be able to accommodate their family coming over here. Very, very interesting. And then the other things that you had just mentioned about your father, it seemed you were really the apple of his eye, I could tell. And it just sounds like you just had such a wonderful, special relationship. Daddy's girl, definitely. And
I was so lucky to have him. I really, really was. Yeah.
Well, definitely my condolences on your loss of your father. It just sounds like such a, again, from what, as I'd mentioned a few times during our conversation here, I feel like I know him just from the way, from reading your book and the way you've described him and everything. Just such a wonderful guy. I guess you can definitely say, it was even though you've lost him, it was a wonderful person to have had in your life, and guess all the better for it, huh?
Yeah. No, absolutely. I think of him all the time, and I have like little Leo-isms that I say sometimes.
Oh yeah.
Dad jokes or bad dad comments. I'm like, where did that come from? But I'm very much my father's daughter, and I'm very proud of that. Very proud of that.
Right. Well, that's great. I had a lot of my father rub off on me too. My father, I was never, as I alluded to in my stand-up routine that I wrote in your class, never the greatest athlete. My father was, but I definitely got his sense of humor. And, again, my father too, I was very fortunate to have had him for the time that I had him and everything. So Alexandra, tell us about where we can get this book, Shimmer, a memoir.
Yeah, Shimmer Yes, Shimmer, a memoir, is available through my website, alexandrahewitt.com. And there you can also see classes that I might be teaching and workshops. And, if you want me to come in and speak about mental health or teach a workshop, I'm happy to do that. It's also available on Amazon. It's only the ebook on Amazon. And then it's available at some local bookstores in Baltimore and the Ivy bookstore, at Atomic Books in Hamden, Manor Mill out in Moncton. I think it still has a few copies. And there's a bookstore on the eastern. Oh, and oh my goodness, it's at a lot of local bookstores. There's a bookstore in Lauraville that I can't think of the name of. Oh my goodness. And there's also a bookstore out on the Eastern Shore that has it. So it's if you go through my website, though, it kind of says where you can buy it through the local bookstores or through my website or again through Amazon. So
well, wonderful. Folks, I would recommend that you read this book. It's a great story. And again, I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed the story. You did a wonderful job on it. And I can also say that she's a great teacher. Alexandra is a great teacher. I really enjoyed the class that I took with her. And tell us also about
Mortified?
Mortified.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes, Mortified. Mortified is a storytelling show that I love. It's where adults share their childhood diaries, love letters, poetry, crap that you have from childhood. Anything 20, we look at things from anything from 21 and under. So it's different than a storytelling show like The Moth, where people tell a story. This is where you actually are reading from your archives, or we're showing, the cartoons you drew, or the I don't know, or the novel you wrote when you were 10, or the poetry you wrote, the sappy love poetry you wrote in high school or when you were 7. All that stuff gets exposed on stage, and it's such a cathartic and voyeuristic, but yet such a beautiful celebration of being a child. We are taking some time off for the summer, so we're not doing a summer show. We'll be back at the Creative Alliance in Baltimore on October 20th. It's Friday night. We have 2 shows, a 7 and a 9:30 p.m. And then we'll have a show in December. I think it's the 8th. It's another Friday night, and then our Valentine's show in February of 2024 at Creative Alliance. And our DC shows, we haven't booked the dates yet, so I don't have those, but it will be in September, October. So September, October, fall, winter, and then our Valentine's is our big shows. So so if you have material, if anyone has anything that they wrote, or a box of crap from, pictures and diaries, love letters, whatever, song lyrics, whatever, videos, kids have videos that they've made, home videos, all kinds of stuff. We look through them. I look through them and decide if it's cringy enough to share. And then I'd work with you to help shape. And we have story producers too that I work with that help me with helping shaping the pieces for the stage. And it's great. I love it. We have a Netflix series, The Mortified Guide, that came out, I think, in 2018. And we actually went to Sundance with one of the episodes. We filmed some of it here in Baltimore. I was part of that and worked as a producer on that and hosted the show. And it was just a lot of fun. I love the show so much. I write every day. I had a diary from when I was 4 or 5. And I still have them, and I've shared my stuff on stage. And I just think it's another way to connect us as human beings, because we're all a little bit weird. At the end of the show, we always say that we're freaks and we're fragile, but we all survived. So and that's also, you can find that out at getmortified.com or on my website. I have information about our upcoming shows and press about the show.
Wonderful. Well, again, as I had mentioned, Alexandra definitely has her hand in a lot of things, and I would urge you to check them out. There's a variety of dates here. You can always go to alexandrahewitt.com, right?
Yep, Hewett.
Yes, Hewett. That's correct. And great. Well, Alexandra, it was great to talk to you again, and great to, I'm glad you came back. And
Mike, thank you for having me. This was fun.
Yeah. And if I can just say one thing here, folks. The biggest thing, Foul Players Radio stands for is shop local, shop small. I have had 287 episodes with some damn talented people. And this is another one of them, I think number 288. And make sure you go out there. I mean, there are great albums, there are great movies, there are great books. All of these things are delightful. They make great gifts. Remember, we've got graduation season, we got Mother's Day, Father's Day, Valentine's Day, the Christmas holidays coming up. Lots of excuses to go out and buy this stuff and give it to somebody as a gift because they do make great gifts. And you're supporting somebody that is, putting themselves out there, and give them your support. Give them your support. There's lots of great talented people out there, and again, Alexandra is one of them. So please show her some love. Check out her website, sign up for one of her classes, come to one of her shows, and folks, we will see you next time. Michael Spedden here on Foul Players Radio. Thanks again, Alexandra.
Thank you, Michael. Take care. Bye.
Thank you for tuning in this evening to our interview with Alexandra Hewitt. Remember, information on purchasing her book, Shimmer, a Memoir, as well as about her classes and Mortified shows can be found at alexandrahewitt.com. You can find all of our episodes at www.foulplayersradio.com, as well as on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/@foulplayersradio. Remember, hit that like and subscribe button and leave us an honest review wherever you watch or listen. Until next time, this is Michael Spedden.
This is Just Bill.
This is Rat Bastardson.
And this is Joe Poodle from Red Die Number 9, and you are listening to Foul Players Radio.
Yeah, hi, this is David Simmons from DC Star, and I am just encouraging all of you to tune in to Michael Spedden's show on Foul Players Radio and love the rock and roll of the past and the art of the future.